Welcome back. In one of the previous steps, we saw that when we run ngserve inside the to-do folder, we were able to launch up the Angular application and we were able to look at it in the browser. In this step, let's explore ngserve further, as well as let's look at a few other ng commands which you can run from your command line. I would want to look at a file called index.html. It's present in the source. So let's go to source index.html. Inside this file is the title. So you see the to do, this is where it's coming from. So let's go ahead and change this to something else. Let's say my to-dos application, and I'm saving it right now. What happens now is you'd see that I'm not doing anything on the browser right now. Within a little while, you'd see that it's auto loaded. That's what ngserve does. ngserve would keep polling your code for changes, and as soon as there is a change, it would pick up, build it, and it would load it into the browser. Let's do another example. Let's go to source app component.html. This is where the actual content of this page is coming from. Welcome to do, the Angular logo, as well as the links which are present in here. For the most part, this is typical HTML, except for something called interpolation, which is being used in here. We'll look at it a little later, but for now, let's remove the h2 and the ul. So I'm removing the links which are present in here and saving it. You'd see that immediately the change is reflected on the browser. That's the most important thing that ngserve brings onto the plate. So as soon as you are making a change, you can see it reflect on your browser. Now let's look at a few other commands. ng space lint. ng space lint, when you run it, it would say linting, and it would finally print that there are no violations which are present. So the questions you might ask is, what is linting? Who's doing the linting? Linting is nothing but checking your code for coding standards. Because the code which we have is generated, we did not write a single line of code by hand yet. All these files pass the coding standards. What we'll do now is we'll introduce a coding standard violation. How can I introduce a coding standard violation? I'll go to Visual Studio Code, open up a file called app.component.ts. The way you can open up a file is by either searching through the Explorer and finding it and opening it, or you can press Command P or Control P. If you're on Mac, it's Command P, and if you're on Windows, it's Control P. You can type in app.component.ts and you should be able to load that specific file into the UI. You'd see that at end of every TypeScript file, there is a new line character. What I'll do is I'll remove the new line character. So now this file has only 10 lines. Let's go to the terminal and do nglint. What you'd see is that it would say there is a file which has a problem. It says lint errors found in the listed files. It says error app.component.ts file should end with a new line. That's what is the standard. Now you might be wondering, where are all these rules defined? All these rules are defined inside a file in our project, which is tslint.json. This is where all the rules are defined, and the end of file rule that we looked at is defined on line 17 right now. So it's end of file line true. So it should make sure that at the end of the file there is a new line character. The great thing about this file is the fact that you can customize it according to the needs of your particular project. Now that I added the new line, I can do nglint and you would see that there are no errors. Now let's get back to the commands and let's run a few more. Let's go on to the next command, which is ngbuild. What does ngbuild do? Let's run it and see what's happening. What you'd see is when you run ngbuild, it says there are specific files created: main.js, polyfills.js, runtime.js, styles.js, vendor.js. And when you go to the IDE, you'd see that there is a new folder which is present in here, which is the dist folder. If you open up the dist folder, you'd see a few files which are present in here: index.js, main.js, and all that kind of stuff. The great thing about this dist folder is you can take this to-do folder and put it behind any web server, and you'd be able to directly launch index.html and run the entire application. So you don't really need any of the other code which is present in here to launch these Angular applications. So typically when we deploy Angular applications to production, what we would do is we would execute ngdist and we would take this folder which is generated and put it on the web server. So ngdist makes it easy to deploy applications to other environments, for example test environments or production. All that you need to do is to copy this to a web server. The next command which we are going to look at is ngtest. Whenever we write applications, we are supposed to write a lot of unit tests. ngtest runs the unit tests which are written for Angular applications. Typically, unit tests for Angular are written in a framework called Jasmine, and we are using Karma to run the unit tests. You can see that all the tests ran and there are 0 failures. In front-end language, tests are called specifications. So these specifications are what are running. And you can see what are the specifications which ran. App component should create an app. App component should have a title to do. App component should render title in a h1 tag. If you want to run any of these specific tests again, you can click them, or you can click the app component to run all the tests again. Let's quickly look at where these tests are defined. There are a few important files related to unit tests. The first one is the karma conf.js. This is the configuration of the test runner, which is Karma. Other than that, there are a number of tests which are written as part of your Angular code. Typically, these files would have an extension .spec.ts. Spec stands for specification, that's basically the test. And if you open up this test file, you should see all the tests which are written. So these are the tests which ran earlier. So you can see all the tests which are present in here. And let's kill this by saying Control C. Now the other command which is present in here is ng e2e. e2e stands for ng end-to-end tests. So end-to-end tests are much more than the unit tests. Unit tests test individual components one at a time. With end-to-end tests, what happens is we would launch the entire Angular application. You can see that we are launching the Angular application at localhost 4200. It's still building up. It might take a little while. So now the application has been launched up, and now you would see that we are actually running the entire application and running tests around it. You'd see that over here it says should display welcome message, and it says one test successful. If you look at the logs, you would see that there was something called a Chrome driver which was downloaded, which is actually something related to the Selenium automation tests. The Chrome driver was installed and the Chrome driver was used to launch up the tests. In Angular, the end-to-end tests are written using a framework called Protractor. Protractor is a layer around the Selenium API which helps us to write end-to-end tests. In this course, we will not be focusing on either the unit tests or the end-to-end tests. All the code for the end-to-end tests is present inside this folder e2e, and over here you would see also the protractor.conf.js. So this is the configuration for Protractor, which is an end-to-end integration testing tool. Angular.json, which is present in here, is the file which defines what should happen when we run specific commands. So we ran a number of commands, right? ng test, ng build, ng lint. The angular.json file is where all these commands are defined. In this quick video, we looked at a few commands which we can execute from the command line which are provided by Angular CLI. We looked at ng-lint, which is to execute coding standards. We saw that there is a file called tslint.json where all the lint rules, all the coding standards are specified. Next, we ran ng-build, and we saw that a dist folder was created which contains all the files which should be sufficient to deploy this specific Angular application to an external web server, external environment. We ran ng-tests, which ran all the unit tests which were created using the Jasmine framework in the spec.ts files using the runner which is defined as part of the karma conf.js. After that, we ran the command ng e2e end to end, and all the tests which were defined in the end to end folder were executed. We saw that the entire application was launched up and protractor was used to run the end-to-end tests. The idea behind this specific video is to give you a big picture overview of all the commands and what are the files associated with them. You might not really need to understand all these files in depth. It's sufficient to know where they are and what they are related to, and that's good enough for now. I'll see you in the next step. Until then, bye-bye.